So I'm going to start that.
Okay.
And we are recording, and it says we are live.
Okay.
So let's take a look at what that looks like here. Yep, I'm seeing there's a video showing live. So I think we're good. And it's a little weird that you don't see it, but if you go into videos, Allie, you'll be able to see the video.
Okay.
All right. We are. Okay, I'm going to close mine so I'm not in the page. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for a little discussion about landlord resources and short-term rental assistance help. I am Kelly Bletcher-Tass. I'm with the York County Coalition on Homelessness, and we are facilitating this discussion today. We have a few guests with us. I'm going to let the guests introduce themselves. I'm going to let them talk a little bit about the resources that their organizations provide. And if you have questions for us, please feel free to put them in the comments on Facebook. We have Allie Smith with us, who's going to be managing comments for us, and we will take some questions at the end. So really briefly, the Coalition on Homelessness is a collaborative organization in York County, Pennsylvania. We work with a variety of organizations in the community, about 50 organizations that help those that are homeless or at risk of homelessness. And so some of those organizations are with us today to talk a little bit about this resource. And we're going to share some information about landlord resources in the community, but also we are here to provide information and answer questions for landlord and property managers about what it's like if you're working with a program who is helping you with a current tenant that has perhaps a back rent that is due and they're receiving some rental assistance that way, or what it's like if you have a new tenant coming to you interested in one of your units, but they are working with a program in the community to help them with move-in costs or to help them get set up in that unit. So we're here to share information about that. A lot of the information we share, admittedly, is directed towards the tenants. So we thought we would provide a session for landlords in the community to ask their questions from their lens and see if we can help with that. Okay, so Shelley, would you like to go first?
I can figure out how to unmute myself. I'm Shelley Peterson. I'm the Director of Housing, Counseling, and Education for Community Progress Council. And Community Progress Council provides a whole lot of services. We're a community action agency for York County, and we provide WIC and Head Start, early Head Start, pre-K counts. We also provide foster grandparents, self-sufficiency program, and let's see, workforce development and housing. And our Housing, Counseling, and Education Department actually provides informational workshops to renters and those who are struggling with financial literacy issues, wanting to build credit or build savings. We also do home buyer workshops so that first-time home buyers are more than welcome to come to us and get the information they need about how to buy a home. We absolutely believe that education is key, and we have our renter workshop, for instance, and I encourage all landlords to actually have their tenants come to our workshop, because what we talk about are the responsibilities of renters, the responsibilities of landlords, how they can work together, because that's the more they communicate, more you communicate with them, they communicate with you, the better it works. And also what their responsibilities are, what your responsibilities are. Obviously, one of their big responsibilities is paying the rent. This has been a tough time with COVID. That's why I've got this behind my as my background, because even with COVID and even with the moratorium on evictions, it doesn't mean that people don't have to pay rent. And that has been our message right from the very first moratorium installment, or when they put it into place, was to absolutely, you still owe rent, you're going to owe rent, and this is a responsibility you have taken on and you need to take care of. And we want to communicate that always to our tenants, so that we feel like we've been supportive in that way of landlords. We're also supporting you in some ways by helping them to understand not only that it's their responsibility to pay rent, but if they can't, to communicate with you that they can't. And if they can't, and they communicate that with you, are there ways to work together to make that happen? One of the ways that, or one of the things that we have right now, you can cut me off too, Kelly, when you need to, but one of the things that we have right now available through Community Progress Council is the Rent Relief Program, which is a very largely funded a rental assistance program that can help many renters. It provides up to $750 a month for each of 6 months, and those months can be anywhere from March through December of this year. We have to show that the tenant was COVID impacted, and you as a landlord would have to provide a landlord application indicating that you understand that $750 for each of 6 months is the rent that you will collect for, or can collect through this fund, because it's paid directly to you. And also you need to certify that your property would pass inspection or meet inspection requirements. So those are the big things there. So it's a joint application. The tenant can't apply for it individually. You can't apply for it individually. It really has to be a communicated effort to get the rental assistance during this time. But it's a big resource. Our initial allocation was $1.4 million. And that covers a whole lot of renters, and that's an awesome possibility for helping making it a whole lot easier for tenants and also for landlords. The application itself is available through the PHFA website. It's also available on the Community Progress website. So if you have tenants that you are behind, and it doesn't matter if they're 1 month behind or 6 months behind, we can, like I said, help back to March. There are processes that everybody has to meet, or requirements in order to get the rental assistance, but all that's spelled out too on our RRP, which is Rent Relief Program, part of our website, so you can look that up. The application, your part is there, the tenant's part is there. The tenant has to show that they've lost at least 30% of their income because of COVID, which obviously if they become totally unemployed, the business is shut down or whatever, they're 100% impacted. If they even had reduced hours, they are eligible, as long as they've lost at least 30% of their income. So it's a big funding stream. One of the things that they've gone and they kind of changed the rules a little bit since they first started the program, is that if there is more than one adult lessee in the household and both of them have lost income, they can each be separately assisted. So that say your rent charge to them is $1,100. Well, $750, that would mean, you know, if it was just one tenant, that would mean that you would have to waive the additional monies from $750 to $1,100. If you have two lessees, now that doesn't mean a mom and a kid, but you have two adult lessees on the lease, you're absolutely, each one of them can apply for up to $750. And we can't pay more than the rent, so you're not getting more than $1,100, but between the two of them, they can be both equally assisted up to whatever it is that will cover the rent. So we encourage the applications. We've had to go back through a few because initially married couples were considered one and not two, and now they're two, and that's better because then they can be separately assisted. So there's some quirky rules. housing@yorkcpc.org. We would be happy to answer emails. Right now, just to kind of give you some hint about how it's been going, July 6th is when it was opened up, the program, and it goes through September the 30th to make applications. Now you can be assisted all the way to the end of December, but the applications can only come in at this point from July 6th through September 30th. And we've taken in 380 applications so far. And of those, the problems with a good number of them, unfortunately, is that they're not complete enough. We're missing something. It could be we're missing the property certification from the landlord. So if you have a tenant, there's a checklist, and you can get that off of our website too. Make sure that everything is submitted, because we can't make a payment unless we have all the paperwork. So it could be a property certification. It could be that you forgot to answer a couple questions, and that's not okay either. Every question has to be answered. It could be that the tenant did not provide us all the pay stubs that we need to evaluate their situation to know that for sure that they lost at least 30% of their income. So there are definitely lots of the 380 applications that we're having to follow up on. We have approved 74 so far, so landlord payments are going to go out to at least 74 households at this point as of this date, and that's good. We also have 49 that have been denied. Most of those that have been denied have been because they did not lose income and they cannot demonstrate that they've lost income. It is not because of there are in a few instances landlords were not willing to work with the tenant specifically on waiving the additional rent loss, because if you've got, like I said, if you've got only one lessee in the household and it's $1,100 is the rent, $750 is the most you can go after to collect, and you can get that from us, but you can't get the rest. You can't go after late fees, can't go after court costs, and some landlords are not willing to do that, and that makes sense to us. But fortunately, that's not most of them, you know, because some money's better than no money for a lot of folks. But some of it's, sometimes the loss is too great too, and I understand that. So there are some situations where landlords have not agreed. That is not the majority of them. Most of the ones that we have denied have been denied because they have actually not lost income because of COVID. And that is absolutely a restriction that, and an eligibility requirement that the program insists on. Let's see, did I use up my 10 minutes? 16
Oh.
it says.
Don't feel pressured. Don't feel pressured. It's good to share this.
And again, with each of the folks that we have, whose applications we're touching and talking to, both landlords and tenants on both sides, because whatever's missing, if we need something extra from the landlord, we'll call. If we need something extra from the tenant, we'll call, or we'll reach out to you by email, because we get both of those on the application, and see if we can follow up. And get those applications to complete so that we can process those and get those payments made. For those folks that are not eligible, there are other resources within the county, and we make those referrals. This program, this rental assistance program, offers the most assistance financially. And so because of that, it's probably the best first stop to avoid evictions for both landlords and tenants. But if in fact they are not eligible, there are other resources, other rental assistance programs within York, and we make those referrals and let the tenants know about those too. I think I'll stop now.
Thank you, Shelley. And you may have said this, but I'm going to reiterate it just in case we have landlords or property managers that work in other areas other than York County. The Rent Relief Program is statewide, but it is organized through different organizations in each community. So I provided Allie with the links. She's going to link in the comments to CPC's website for the Rent Relief Program in York County. There's also a link to the PHFA website that Shelley referenced. Their applications are there as well. And I think they do have a list of the organizations in each community on that website. So if you're operating in another county in Pennsylvania, we can at least, you know, get you to the right place there as well for that program.
And the likelihood is not high that we'll run out of the money. You know, sometimes with this funding stream, with different rental assistance programs, it's first come, first serve, and when the money's gone, it's done. But they've indicated to us that the 1.4 million is an initial allocation, and that depending on whether all of that's expended and we have applications and folks that need more, that they'll give us more and provide us more, so that's not, we're not limited to the 1.4 million. So it really is an awful lot of money coming into just York County for this purpose, and it's awesome.
It is a significantly larger amount of money than we will receive through other avenues of CARES Act, coronavirus response money, or even annual funding that we receive to do these services. Allie does say she has a question for you, Shelley. Do you want to take that right now?
Okay. Yes, I had one question in the comments. What is the usual turnaround time for processing?
That's a great question. Let's see. If this were July 6th, I would have said 10 days. Or I think on July 6th, I did say 10 days. And then PHFA told us that we had to wait until we had money in the hand. And of course, they did not make our allocation available to us. We did not receive it until Monday of this week.
But that's good news. That means you have
But
the
we
funds
have it.
now.
We have it.
And when you process applications now, you're able to provide those payments in a relatively short amount of time.
Yes, yes. So any application that's complete already, we should be able to pay within 10 days. Now, what we will not do is pay forward for months that we haven't reached yet. So for instance, if you need to be paid for March through August, that's not a problem. That can be all one payment to a landlord. If we're paying forward September, October, November, those have to wait until those months come. So the first of every month going forward would be paid separately. But yeah, it's supposed to be a 10-day process, but we had to wait until we had money in hand. Now we do, so that's a good thing. And our first checks are going out tomorrow, day after tomorrow. And we're glad for that.
That is exciting.
It is.
I know how hard you work to get to that point, so it is exciting.
Yeah, and it's more than $250,000 going out on Friday.
Yeah, there you go, guys. More than $250,000. That's impressive. All right, let's move on to, how about Frida? Would you like to speak next?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, so my name is Frida Bankia, and I'm representing Bell Next Door program. So I'm the program coordinator at Bell Next Door. So Bell is a large organization, but today I will just be talking about Next Door on it. So the Next Door program have been around since 2017. So we serve population from age 18 and above. So we have different funding, of course. So I will try to go into the one that's right now we kind of like servicing consumers with. So we service adults, like I said, that have the income guideline of 250% the poverty line. So we serve individuals that are homeless, near homeless, residing in jail, shelter, mental health facility. We service clients that are living in abandoned buildings, sleeping on the streets, in their cars. And then of course, for the population that are near homeless, you have to have a notice to quit from the landlord. First, we were going with like the court order, but because of COVID, we kind of like, change some guidelines. So now you just have to have a letter from your landlord stating that you are behind in rent. So for short-term rental assistance, we help clients either move into an apartment. So if you need help with security deposit or first month rent, if we have that funding, we will cover that. If you are homeless in the shelter and you need short-term assistance, like 3 months, depending on the funding source, we'll cover that. Right now, the funding that we have and are helping clients with eviction prevention, we have the city CDBG funds, which is the community block grant. We got that from the city. So consumers can get anywhere from $3,000 from, let me just say, from $1 to $3,000, but we can only pay $3,000 limit. So if you owe $4,000, we can only help with $3,000. And for that funding, you have to be York City resident. So we are not helping county resident right now because we do not have that funds to help the county residents. So it's York City residents on it. You have to prove that you have future ability to pay rent. So meaning you have to have income. If we cover that $3,000 in the future, you will be able to pay your future rent. And of course, you have to show like your county resident. And then we got some funds that came in for CARES, for HAP, the Homeless Assistance Program. So the CARES HAP, so we just call it CARE CV. So for that funding, the waiver that we got, first, if consumers have gotten HAP within like 24 months, they wasn't approved, but now with COVID, they are approved, so that got waived. So if you got HAP last year, you can get HAP this year, but the amount did not change. So single individuals still get $1,000 and family get 1,500. However, with that funding, you have to be able to prove again that you can pay, you have the ability to pay future rent, and you have to pay the 15% of whatever amount we owe. Now we have funding, we can move you into an apartment. So if you're in the shelter or you sleeping in your car or abandoned building, we can move you into an apartment. So if a single person is moving into an apartment and say the apartment is like $500 a month, you can get $1,000 from us. But if the landlord is asking for double security deposit, which most times some landlords do ask for that, we'll pay the full 1,000, but you have to show proof of payment that you paid to the landlord, and we'll confirm that with the landlord. Okay, did John Brown pay this 500 before we issue the $1,000? And then for a family, like I said, they can get up to 1,500, but they have to pay 15% of that amount. But if they are moving into an apartment that is going to cost them like $2,000, we'll pay the whole 1,500, but they have to be able to provide proof of payment for the 500 before we pay the 1,500. So, and then for our short-term rental assistance, like the COC or the ESG program, if consumers get referred to that program, then necessarily doesn't have to have income, because what the caseworkers are next to does is work with the client to make sure they can secure income, because first we want to see like their house, and once they get into housing, we can kind of make sure like, you know, everything else they need. They work with the caseworker to make sure like employment is, you know, they secure employment, childcare, they can secure that. However, with those fundings, we can pay full security deposit. The client doesn't have to pay anything. So if the landlord asks for double the security deposit, and we know some of the population we serve, their rental history is not as great. So to get the landlords working with us to build that relationship, we kind of not necessarily negotiate, but just like, you know, talk to the landlord to say, hey, just so you can get this person into a house, we are waiting to pay double the security deposit. And then with the double the security deposit, the client is meeting with the consumer once a month. And then some landlords, I know they ask like, okay, this client is not working right now. What is it if I rent to them? How will it be? How would they pay like water bill, light bill, and all of that? Of course, then we have like resources that we can always like refer the consumer to. But the goal is to like at least house them, and once they are housed, it's like that burden is lift off of them, and then they can always like, you know, secure other necessary employment that they need. So for like how we take refer our next door. For homeless individuals, you just have to call. So once you call the front desk, our case manager assistant, get your name, your phone number, the intake caseworker will either call you right away, or one of the caseworker will call you, and then we complete an assessment. Once that homeless assessment is completed on the consumer, and then they get on the wait list, and of course, Kelly oversee that list Monday and Wednesday, where we kind of take individuals based on like the funding that we have. And then for individuals that are near homeless, once you call the office right now, what we do is we have a wait list. So individuals get on that wait list, and every week I go through that list, and after I contact our administrative financial department, she said, okay, we can take like 10 people on this list. We can take 5 people, and then I'll go through that list. Try to pick people that make sure, you know, once we help them, they will kind of leave from in that hole. If you owe like $3,000 and you have future ability to pay rent, definitely you will get referral. We have some clients, like Shetty said, they did not lose any income, even though our guidelines never say you have to lose income. But I look on our list and try to pick people like at the end of the day is more beneficiary to them. So we pick clients from on the list, and then the caseworker, within 24 hours, they will get back to those consumers, and then we start the paperwork. So it just depends on how fast the clients bring information over. If the caseworker contact you today and you can, you know, get your lease, your social security card, birth certificate, or the document you need. My caseworker have been turning file in, like I send referrals out on Monday, and I get the file back on like a Wednesday. So far, between July 2nd up to today, when I checked the list before I left, we have served about 34 families. So some of those families range like household size anywhere from like 7 to 8. So if you add those numbers, we have served a lot of consumers with the city CDBG funds. Now we just started taking consumers for the HAP, so the caseworkers are still working on that, but I sent about 15 referrals out. So we've been working a lot, just trying to make sure clients are staying house and making sure like, you know, we connecting them with resources. But just to kind of give landlords some, you know, ease of mind, Nextdoor do not only provide rental assistance. I like to push to the public that we provide case management service as well. And case management is so important. It's not all about just shooting money out of the door. Like we connect these clients with like resources, like I said, childcare, employment, education resources. We sometimes send consumers to CPC to make sure, you know, they can get like money management skills to just, you know, how to like budget their money, even though we do some budgeting, but it's not as intense as CPC does. So we send consumers that way and just like make sure they have like an open communication with them and the landlord, because the lease is between them and their landlord, even though we are helping to pay, especially for our consumers that go into like the program, 3 to 6 month program, the lease is between them and the landlord. So once they meet with the caseworker, we try to open that line of communication where you communicate something with your landlord, and then if it's not resolved, you can always get back. And we encourage the landlords to just, you know, keep an open communication between the caseworkers and their tenant. That's why once they pay the rent, they provide us with receipt. We confirm that with the landlord. You know, the John Brown paid his rent, and the landlord confirm it. So the caseworkers always have open communication with the landlords to just make sure, you know, their rent is being paid on time. The clients are doing what they're supposed to do. So in the near future, once that clients leave or the landlord has another, you know, that some landlords buy multiple buildings within the city. So we just kind of encourage them to always reach out to us. We have a list of landlords that we work with. So we update those lists all the time, you know, just to keep that line of communication. We refer clients. Like I said, we provide case management services. What some of the consumers we know, like in the long run, they would need more service. So before that time reaches, we all would already have like a game plan, like for them applying for like Section 8, low income housing. So we provide all of that. So like I said, I will try not to get into like the funding, because there is so much different funding, and sometimes we have some funding and sometimes we don't. So, but if landlords have any questions about, you know, like say, I know I have some landlords that personally, they will reach out to us at Nextdoor and say, hey, I'm working with this client. They are renting from me right now. They are behind in their rent. Do you think you can help them? So we always encourage landlords to reach out to us on behalf of their tenants, because not everyone know about all these great resources within York. So some landlords do actually reach out, and like I said, we are open to answering questions, because we always want to have a good relationship with the landlord. So clients are housed and we don't have a lot of homelessness in the city. So if you have any questions, I'm waiting to answer them. Hopefully I didn't forget about anything, but I think I cover everything we do.
You did an excellent job, Alfreda. Thank you so much. And I think you're right to stress the point that you have case management available. A lot of the funding that goes through the Nextdoor program requires case management while the individual's receiving rental assistance. But the really excellent resource with Nextdoor is that they have case management that can be provided outside of that. So even if someone has already received their financial resources for their rent, they can continue to meet with a case manager and continue to get things on track and to connect to resources. And that's a really valuable resource that a lot of communities don't have. So absolutely, that is a really great benefit. All right, and let's see. Do we have any questions? I don't think we have any questions yet for Alfreda. So I think we're okay there. So the Coalition on Homelessness is housed within the York County Planning Commission. And we receive dollars through the County of York for homeless prevention, which is kind of your eviction prevention when someone is behind on their rent. It also covers some categories of folks that are potentially staying with a family or friend because they don't have the ability to move into their own place, and also homeless populations. And we have additional funding that has not been distributed in the community yet. So I've been on a couple of Facebook Lives and Zooms, and I've kept my information really vague because it isn't available yet. But what I can tell you is Alfreda mentioned her city CDBG, which is Community Development Block Grant. The county also receives CDBG funding. So the city funding from that pot of funding can only be used for city residents. Alternately, the county funding can only be used for county residents. That money is not available yet, but it should be coming very shortly. And for that particular program, it will provide about 3 months of rental assistance, whether that's moving into a new unit or whether it's paying back arrears. So that's another resource that should be coming very soon. And we also have something we call Emergency Solutions Grant. Alfreda receives traditional Emergency Solutions Grant money on an annual cycle, but we're also getting additional money in response to coronavirus through the CARES Act. And that money should be here shortly as well. It also can assist people with moving in. It also provides for case management and all of those things that Alfreda spoke on for the Next Door program. There will also be a few more organizations in the community that will be receiving those dollars. New Hope Ministries, which serves Dillsburg, Dover, Hanover areas, is going to be receiving some of those dollars from the county CDBG. And also an organization called The Program, It's About Change, is going to be receiving some dollars as well. And their focus is on reentrance, so individuals who've come out of jail or prison and are looking to stabilize in housing. So just a little bit of information about what is to come from those funding streams as well. I am going to let Megan go next. So Megan, would you like to talk about your programs, what you offer, and who you serve?
Sure. Hello. My name is Megan. I am the program supervisor for the rapid rehousing and transitional housing programs with Valley Youth House. We serve youth ages 18 to 24 who are experiencing homelessness. In order to qualify for our rapid rehousing program or our transitional housing program, youth need to be what HUD deems literally homeless. So they either need to be in a shelter, living on the streets, or in their car. Some of the qualifications will be shifting with some new funding that we're having in as far as preventative dollars. But for right now, the majority of our program is focused on rapid rehousing, so housing youth who are currently experiencing homelessness. We offer rental assistance between 12 and 24 months based on the needs of our youth in the rapid rehousing program. We utilize a income verification process to see if the youth are able to afford the rent on their own at the end of their lease. If they're not, then we extend services for 3 months. We reevaluate income, abilities to maintain their housing, and we do that all the way up to 24 months with the hope that at the end of the 2 years, youth are able to successfully support themselves in their own housing. In our transitional housing program, we have 2 units, and we're able to house 4 youth, and those apartments are in our name, and it's a step to youth getting a lease in their own name in our rapid rehousing program. So for the rapid rehousing, that's our largest program. We currently are housing 27 youth, and we have the availability to house 4 youth in our transitional housing program, which is more like a shelter. With the CARES Act money, we will be getting an expansion. We'll be able to serve an additional 10 to 15 households based on the rental price. Throughout the program, the way that we, help our youth become self-sufficient, kind of like what Alfreda was saying, we provide a lot of case management. So throughout the first lease term, the lease is signed in the name of our youth. We provide one-on-one case management on a weekly basis, so 2 hours to start. As youth transition into becoming more self-sufficient, we do pull back, but throughout the entirety of their time in our program, we provide very close case management. We also maintain a lot of communication with our property owners and landlords, property management companies, depending on who we're partnering with, to ensure that the youth are meeting their end of the lease agreement. If they aren't, we oftentimes act as a mediator. We try and bring the two parties together to use it as a teachable moment for our youth in the program. A lot of times, youth are getting their first lease ever in their own name, so there's a lot of things they don't know yet, and that's really where we come in and providing that support for the youth and making sure landlords feel like we're supporting their needs as well, because we know that as landlords, you have your bills to pay just as much as the youth need to pay their rent. We operate a step down program. So throughout our program, we do, after the first 3 months, we pay 100% of the rent, and then we start to step down. So the next 3 months of their lease term, youth will take on 25% of their rent. We do that all the way until the end of the lease. And at the last 3 months, youth are paying 75%, we're paying 25%. This is, we've found to be really successful in building youth's capacity to know how to pay their rent, who to call if they don't have their rent, to maintain that open communication. It doesn't mean that if a youth, like right now with COVID, the last few months we've been covering youth's rental payments whenever they lost their jobs. So it's not that, it's more of the learning process. We really want our youth to learn how to pay their bills, who to call if they can't pay their bills, connect them with community resources whenever they need to open utility services and they need, $200 for security deposit. We have to work with them throughout that entire process. And another thing that we lean on a lot is the natural consequences. So really trying to work with landlords to have a relationship with the tenant, with our youth that we're serving, so that the tenants can understand in the real world what it might look like. So we don't want to act as such a buffer that they don't know how to, talk to the landlord if the landlord isn't happy about what's going on. We always encourage the youth, why don't we call together? You're nervous? Okay, I'll call with you. But our role with our landlord partnerships is definitely to maintain the open communication, make sure the youth knows exactly what's expected of them, and then provide that educational piece for our young people so that they can be successful at the end of the 24 months. A lot of times we do, we pitch it to the youth like it starts off as a 12-month program, and we're with you for one lease term. But we do have the ability to extend that if the youth is not stable at the end of the first lease term. And that's our program. Like I said, we are going to be getting some preventative dollars from the CARES Act, but we haven't figured out from our side, we haven't gotten the funding yet, so we're not exactly sure what the requirements are going to be for that preventative piece yet.
Thank you, Megan. And just a couple of things that I thought of while you were talking, just maybe to draw out, is especially in youth populations 18 to 24, there is an opportunity there as well for roommate situations. I know how many of us in our first couple of apartments had a roommate, because it makes it more affordable. And Valley Youth House does work with roommates. They work with supporting both of the people that are living in that unit. They also take into their program parenting youth. So someone who's young that has children of their own and is trying to get established on their own for the first time. So those are some populations that they do really excellent work in our community for us with those youth populations, and teaching them what they need to be a good tenant for all of our landlord and property managers out there right from the start. Things that probably we all wish we knew when we were young tenants, and probably feel like we probably should apologize at this point. So we're sorry for all those things we did as young tenants who didn't know, but we're working to provide informed tenants moving forward in the community. Okay, let's see. Kurt, would you like to talk a little bit about resources for landlords from a legal perspective?
Sure, be real happy to. So for a while there, I was hearing from a lot of landlords that they didn't feel like there were any resources. We had moratoriums from federal agencies, moratoriums on a state level, magisterial district judges on a local level. For what it's worth, that's opening up now. And what we've seen is it's not been in the papers much. We're filing lawsuits and going forward for evictions for tenants that I can honestly tell you are not taking advantage of your programs. They're not willing to look at them. They're not taking the referrals. We've sent letters, we've communicated, we've given them opportunities, and a lot of them just have turned their nose or chosen not to. So probably 80% of the magisterial district judges in York County are accepting eviction filings for the non-payment of rent at this point. Couple exceptions. Number one, the waiver of notice to quit, which is a statewide legal requirement, has to be waived in their lease. If it's waived, that's one criteria. They can go forward. Two would be that they're not at what's called the CARES Act excluded housing. So anyone that's getting federal assistance, tax credits, Section 8, housing, those type of housing scenarios are not going to be able to go forward at this point until this federal time period of moratorium ends. But we are seeing most of the courts opening up that they're able to go forward. There are, of course, I know of at least 2 judges in York County that are saying absolutely not. They're not prepared to. They don't believe it's appropriate. But the majority, 3 of the 4 in the city are going forward. I know of 2 in the outlying county that are not. The rest are letting us go forward. They have all along, if there was that horror story of destroying the properties, moving 100 people in, outlandish kind of behavior, things that were clearly rules violations. I've been able to get those things and get them moving forward. So from a landlord perspective, I think the insight I want most to take from this is that there are some resources and that we're going back. Having said that, every landlord needs to know if they're going to go to the magistrate and file, there's a brand new affidavit that must be filed in every single case. And it's called the Affidavit of Compliance with the CARES Act. It's on their websites under the Unified Judicial System, the UJS, or the PA docket forms are there. Most of the magistrates are giving it out, but it's where they're going to have to absolutely affirm, I don't have a federal mortgage. I'm not in these federal programs. It's not a Section 8 tenant. I didn't take advantage of some of these mortgage moratorium payment things under my federal. If they certify to that, then that gives them the opportunity. If they're not filing this and certifying it, they're not going to accept a landlord-tenant filing. I can tell you, I've had a number of clients say, oh, I don't have a federal mortgage, and we run them and they pop as a federal mortgage. There's a mortgage out there, the Fannie Mae, the Freddie Backs, those are all federally backed mortgages. Anyone that pretty much had a house that maybe they had it and then they got married or moved into a relationship with a significant other and they left one house out there to rent it, most of those are Fannie Mae backed. And if they go through the CARES Act, they can find the link and it'll pop saying, yes, it's Fannie Mae, federal exclusion, you can't do it. And I can tell you that legal services, the judges, everyone are aware of these links and they are going after those. Part of why this opened up is the Attorney General filed a response in response to the governor's moratorium. And when they did that, they said, hey, here are the exclusions. If notices of quit have to be given, you can't go forward. And that kind of opened up that just about any good written lease waives notice of quit is allowing these landlords to go forward. I'm suggesting particularly March, April, May, June, even into July, late fees are not applicable. The landlords are going to have to just get rid of those things and not be charging those in my evaluations of it. But absolutely the rents, if these tenants aren't trying to take steps. We have sent out to all the magistrates across the state through AOPC, that's their oversight board. They have gotten checklists, the compliance of the CARES Act instructions. They're aware of a lot of these programs that are out there. They're trying to counsel. It's not the judge's role to get involved and take a position, but they are trying to say to tenants when they're coming in or calling in, there's resources, call these companies, do something, take some steps, show some initiative, please respond. If they're showing that, every landlord I've been working with is saying, hey, we'll work with them, we'll deal with it, but there's so many that have just chosen not to do anything. And frankly, that's the right result then, is to go to court and get our evictions.
That's helpful. Thank you. And actually, before we started our live tonight, Shelley and I were talking about how few landlords seem to understand that they could still move forward with a magistrate for something like destroying the property, that moratorium was really intended for the non-payment of rent because of the financial situations that we're all in due to coronavirus.
Right, the non-payment of rent or the end of the lease.
Right.
You know, but if someone was damaging properties, causing damage, violating rules, and it has to, you know, I had a bunch of them call me and they say, well, what about this? They're late. That's a rule. No, late payment's not a rule we're going to prevail on. But if they're bringing in a dog that's not supposed to be there and it's not a support animal, if they've moved a lot of extra people in, if they're causing damage, if they're creating harm for other tenants, dealing drugs is a big one I hear about regularly. You know, those are things they can go forward with and take the steps.
Yeah,
As long as even there, they're not a CARES Act case, in my opinion, because pretty much the judges are looking at and they're painting with a big brush there that if you're CARES Act, you're not bringing any case at this point.
Yeah, I think that's important to know. You know, no one wants their property destroyed. No one wants to have to sit by while that's happening. And it's good that they can still take steps for that.
Correct.
Wonderful. You mentioned the waived notice to quit.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about
Sure.
that?
So notice to quit is in the Pennsylvania Landlord Tenant Act, there's a specific provision that says before you could bring an eviction proceeding for non-payment of rent, you have to tell a tenant that they didn't pay. And that must be a 10-day notice. They have to be personally served or posted on the door. If it's rules violations and other things, there's different time parameters that are longer, like 15 or 30 days that we get into. There is a provision in that same act, though, that says that you may waive that act. So most good leases, there's one I have out there with the Real Estate Investors Group that specifically says that no notice to quit will be given. You're not going to be told you're in default. You'll have an opportunity to defend yourself at court. You'll have an opportunity to raise any defenses there or present any case, but we don't have to tell you in default. We have the ability to go forward to the court without giving that notice. If someone's a verbal lease, an oral lease, absolutely they've got to give these notices, and any of these verbal leases aren't going to be moving forward anytime soon. But there's, you know, that's the biggest reason I tell clients to have a written lease is that waiver of notice to quit. If someone has said, you know what, I'm not paying, you know, the heck with you, we're not dealing with it. We don't have to give them almost a half a month more time to prepare the notice, post a notice, wait for 10 days to go by, and now hope it doesn't fall on a weekend, a holiday that extends it out farther. We can do it and get going farther. A lot of people in their leases, they've used some of the ones they found online. They find them in Staples or whatever. Most don't have the full waiver of notice to quit. Some of them say that it's a 3-day notice or it doesn't have to be personally served. It can be by text or email. All of those are excluded and going forward to magistrate. It's got to be a complete waiver of the notice to quit at this point.
Perfect.
And they can't institute it right now either. But
Yeah.
on the renewal of lease, you could add it as an amendment on the at renewal term. So landlords should absolutely think about it if it's not already in there.
You know, for years, I've been pushing even month-to-month leases, you know, for a lot of reasons. And I push a month-to-month lease because if I have to prove drug dealing, go in front of a judge, I have no lab tests. I don't have a drug expert, and typically the police are still investigating, so I'm not going to bring them in. If I have a tenant that's causing noise commotions at night and every other tenant in the hallway is calling me, they will all call the landlord every night at midnight, but not one of them wants to show up at court and face the person. If I have a lease that's a month-to-month lease in normal times, not during this COVID moratorium, but in normal times, I could say, you know what, at the end of next month, we're not going to renew. It's not a 30-day notice. If I gave a notice today, it's going to be when the lease ends the end of September. It won't be September 12th that I can go in front of the judge. But, you know, a lot of them I'm saying month to month, that's a great one because you don't have to get into proving any of these issues. You can just say, you know, frankly, it's five things I have to show the judge. There was a lease, it was month to month, proper notice, they're still there, here we are. It's a very simple case and it's a very difficult one to defend for the other side. At the same point, landlords only going to make money if they keep tenants in their property. So, you know, I try to make sure they understand you got to have a happy medium, give and take here. And I think we're seeing a lot of great responses out of management companies and landlords that are saying, you know, hey, we want to work with these people. They're reaching out, they're calling them, they're reviewing things, they're trying to get a good positive communication. That's the one positive out of all of this is we're seeing a lot of people getting to know each other here on all the programs and all the ones that used to be adversaries and some of the tenant-based groups versus landlord groups. They're also now talking and finding some common ground.
Perfect, thank you. Allie, do you have, I think you have a question. You want to ask that one of Kurt before we move on?
Yes. Pull it up. I have a question. If the notice to quit has been issued and after the tenant catches up on back rent, can the landlord still proceed with the eviction?
All right, good. So if I've given a notice to quit, you could also look at that notice to quit as a notice to cure. So if that tenant pays all their monies in that 10-day time period from the posting of the notice until the 10 days expires, if that's the only issue, it's financial and it's been paid, that's the end of the case. You know, you're not going to file. And the same thing, it's a great point actually to continue with. If I go in front of an MDJ and my only case is about money, it's going to be a conditional case, pay and stay, it's called. Pay and stay means is that we're only there about money, and they have up until the time period that constable would show up on a lockout to pay that back judgment amount and end this case and continue living in that property. So the beauty is you're looking at some of these programs even, is these tenants, if I file tomorrow, we're going to have a 5-week window before I have the final lockout. We've got a lot of opportunity for people not to become homeless, to take steps, apply to these programs, and really initiate a lot. There is no quick process. I can't shorten that. That's the best case scenario is 5 weeks. And we have Labor Day coming up and we have all these other things happening. It's going to stretch out. The judges are getting absolutely hammered with some of the filings. There's not a lot of hearing space. It's going to stretch out. So pay and stay is a big one. If they pay it, that ends it. And landlords can't say, if I file today and I have my judgment hearing in August, I can't take the money they pay me in September and say, oh, that's September rent, you still owe me on the judgment. The judge's approach is going to be, it's getting paid on the oldest first. And a lot of us, we're doing these forbearance agreements too, where we're saying, hey, we'll forbear, we'll hold off on evicting you, we'll give you some time period to get this stuff to happen. The one time parameter that we're up against, though, is once I get an order of possession from the MDJ, I must institute that within 120 days. After 120 days, I can't file for possession. So there's a lot of times we do it a lot in the winter when we know there's tax returns coming, particularly that we know there's a source of money. Now we have a different funding scenario. Not a bad idea to potentially look at that if we think they're close, they're going to be applying, getting it. I'm not sure how many people are moving and looking for housing either at this point. So I think it makes a lot of sense to try and make it work.
Yeah, I would agree. But to that same point then, if your tenants are behind on rent, but there are other reasons you don't want them in the unit, then those need to be reflected in your filing, correct?
Right. When they would file the landlord-tenant complaint, if they only fill out money, it's going to default to the pay and stay or conditional. If they want unconditional possession, they're going to have to come about 2/3 of the way down on that complaint. They're going to have to check the box if there's a rules violation, spell out that rules violation, successfully present that to the court, and then they'll get the possession case fully. But a lot of landlords don't understand that. They think once they win at the MDJ and there's no appeal, that's the end of it. And they go and sign a new lease and they're calling me up saying, why is this constable refusing to lock someone out? I'm like, well, you had a pay and stay. What's that? Makes it very tricky for them at that point.
Understood. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for putting this on.
Oh, sure. We're hopeful that it's helpful to everyone out there. And since it's on Facebook, it'll be here for folks to access. And after this is over, I will see what I can do to put it on YouTube as well, so it can be shared there too. Okay, Brittany, wrap us up with landlord resources and opportunities.
Kelly. So my name is Brittany Mellinger. I'm with the York Housing Opportunity Center, which is part of the Lancaster Housing Opportunity Partnership. So we've been around for 26 years, and our goal is to foster access to housing. Our programs include support for first-time homebuyers, funds to support affordable housing development, neighborhood revitalization, and fair housing outreach and education. So we began in Lancaster, hence our name, but we expanded into York in 2017. And our perspective is that ensuring that everyone has access to housing requires partnerships. Just one sector alone is not going to be able to solve our current housing issues. It takes landlords and property managers, social service providers, programs, tenants, investors, homeowners, and local officials and leaders in order to be able to solve the issues that we're facing and come up with practical solutions. So we're here to support that process. So our programs in York support both homeownership as well as rental housing. We're funded by HUD in order to provide fair housing outreach and education. Fair housing can often get kind of a bad rap, especially among the landlord community. It's often associated with compliance and violations and a whole lot of paperwork. Our goal is to be able to guide you through all of that fine print and just help you stay focused on what you're trying to do, which is get stable tenants and provide quality housing, ensuring your own income stability. And a lot of folks assume that we just assist tenants, but we do support both sides of the landlord-tenant relationship. In a couple of different ways. We produce some written materials. So we've got our landlord and tenant guide, which is a really helpful written resource that provides fair housing and landlord tenant information. We produce The Bottom Line, which is a magazine that's for landlords and property managers, providing information about fair housing issues, local resources. We produce that twice a year. One just came out last month, and that's available on our website. We do one-on-one assistance. So sometimes there are issues in a landlord-tenant relationship that just can't be resolved one-on-one. So our staff is available to help mediate that situation, particularly if there's a fair housing issue involved. Sometimes just having that third person to help clarify the issue, de-escalate any tension, and see where a compromise can be made can be really helpful. And we provide that service free of charge. We also provide technical assistance, guidance, if you've got fair housing, landlord-tenant issues that you just aren't sure how to resolve or what the next step is. We're happy to provide information and referral in case it's something that we can't assist with. We also do larger scale workshops. So we offer some on fair housing topics, such as fair housing in criminal backgrounds, assistance animals, limited English proficiency, things like that that folks might not know all the fine details on, as well as more general ones on landlord-tenant rights and responsibilities. We actually have one upcoming on landlord-tenant communication. That'll be next week. It'll be Thursday, August 20th. From 7 to 8 p.m. and we're offering that in partnership with the City of York Human Relations Commission. So invite anyone to join us for that one as well. Lastly, we also have the rental housing search engine. So it's a great place to list your units. It's quick, free, easy to use. We get calls from tenants all of the time who are seeking housing. So people check that often, and it's got a lot of search features, so it's pretty handy, and I encourage you to check it out. So we just encourage you to reach out. There's a lot to keep up on as a landlord. So many federal, state, and local regulations, and this is especially true during COVID-19 and the eviction moratoriums that Kurt was already talking about. So if you have questions, let us know. We're happy to answer any questions you might have or point you in the direction of someone that can, if it's outside of our expertise. Landlord-tenant relationships can be pretty challenging. So communication can get pretty heated pretty quickly. And I know from the landlord perspective, it's your income stability and your investment that you're trying to protect. And I totally understand that. Money that you're counting on to meet your own bills and obligations. From the tenant's perspective, it's their home and where their family lives. So there's a lot riding on both sides of the relationship. So again, we are happy to step in and help with that discussion. Yeah. I think that's all that I had. So thanks so much, Kelly, for the invitation to join you all tonight.
Absolutely, and I appreciate everyone sharing so much information. Hopefully people find it helpful. Just a couple of things to close. I'm going to let Allie check. I don't think we have additional questions right now, but I'm going to let Allie check while I talk. But just as a kind of a closer, I am going to share the flyer for the event that Brittany just mentioned on the Coalition Facebook page. So you'll see it there very shortly. So that is next week. We are also doing a session very similar to this next week. Actually, Kurt will be back to join us next week. We are going to do one on Wednesday the 19th to talk about long-term subsidy. So what's it like as a landlord when someone approaches you, is interested in your unit, and has something like a housing choice voucher from the housing authority or a health choices voucher from the York Adams Health Choices Management Unit, something to that effect. And what as you as a landlord need to know about a long-term subsidy, and anything helpful that we can do around those topics. So that will be Wednesday the 19th. Brittany's YHOP, the York Housing Opportunities Program organization, their event is on the 20th. So a couple of things happening next week. And the last thing I'll leave you with, I mentioned some of the funding through my organization and through the office that we're housed in at the County of York isn't available yet. And so I encourage everyone to really keep in mind that you can always use the 211 resource to connect to available housing programs. So all of our organizations here and others that I mentioned, we keep our information up to date with the 211 information line. So we try to make sure that they know who has funding, who's eligible for that funding. So when someone calls in looking for a referral to housing assistance in York County, they get to the right place. So I always encourage you to keep in mind that a call to 211, they will typically ask a few questions. You can call as a landlord or an owner or a property manager. You can also encourage your tenants to call, but anyone seeking housing help will be directed to a variety of organizations based on their need and based on their eligibility. You heard a few of the programs stating that you need to have a loss of income from COVID, for example. So they do a few front-end questions to determine what the best fit is in the community, and they're an excellent resource to keep in mind as you move forward, looking for supports to keep folks in your units or to house new individuals that are interested in spaces that you have available. All right, Allie, do you have anything else from the comments for us?
I do not.
Okay, anything else from our group before we say goodbye?
I was just going to add, there are so many resources in York for renters, for tenants, but particularly for tenants during this time. So absolutely, you know, when I was in property management for about 12 years, and I think that was one of the toughest things was having to evict, especially when there were children in the house. And yet there are resources that can help those tenants, both if the eviction has to occur, there are lots of good resources. Nobody has to sleep on the street in York County, ever. And so just know that you have to do what you have to do as a landlord, and but there are resources for tenants, and you can help them with with identifying some of those or getting in touch with some of those, and that's significant and can be very helpful. And it helps you feel better too about if I got to go through with this eviction, and you might have to, that there are resources available for tenants to access. Even in their homelessness, they're not going to sleep on the streets.
Yes. And to the point of homelessness, you know, we do also have access and connection to emergency shelter resources. So there are plenty of things out there. The key is you have to ask. We have to know that there's a need. So please keep that in mind. From a landlord perspective, if there's anything that you don't see being offered, you know, certainly you can reach out to me. You can reach out to Brittany. We obviously work together. But if there's something that from a landlord perspective is needed in the community, please let us know. You know, Shelley said there's a lot of resources for tenants, and we do typically focus on guiding tenants to those resources, but we know that landlords need resources too. So please don't hesitate to share your thoughts or feelings or something maybe you've even heard in another community or you've experienced in another community that you'd like to see here, and we're certainly here to help you as well as your tenants. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate all of our panelists, and I appreciate everyone who sat in and watched our video today. Thank you again, and think about joining us next week as well.
Hey, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.